Today's coffee chat is going to be about trust. And I am trusting that this recording goes well because this is my second time recording this video. And I just have a lot to say and I really want y'all to get this. But before we dive deep, let me do my quick plugs. Make sure you are following me on LinkedIn and Substack if you are looking for college career resources. I'm also offering virtual coffee chat, so if you want to speak with me one-on-one, that service is available, as well as college and career road mapping, so we could work more in depth. And I also added parent education, so using my education expertise, helping parents through parenthood. But that is enough of that. Let's talk about trust. As always, these are not scripted. I don't have anything written down. I'm just going to speak directly from like a stream of consciousness per se. And I think this is quite ironic that after I recorded this video on trust, the video is not working. And so this is a new insight and a new experience that I have with trust, that I'm trusting that this is going to work out. But I think that extends, and that's a great entry point to our conversation today, because I've always equated trust to truth telling. An extension of that sentence is truth telling without brutality. Now, to give y'all some context and to be vulnerable with y'all, is I was raised in a military family, as you know, but I didn't have frame of references of, trust without brutality, or a lot of frame of points of reference, I guess I should say, with like vulnerability and showing up in my emotions, being seen, heard, and perceived without being perceived as weak. I think that's also important. But recently, I was in a situation that really opened my eyes in trust and challenging this perspective and notion and belief in which I had this monolithic perspective on trust, which trust is only truth telling. And I realized that I broke somebody's trust. And it wasn't due to dishonesty. It wasn't due to like being bamboozled. It wasn't any of that. But simply me leaving abruptly broke trust. Now, another transparent moment, y'all. I am avoidant, okay? I have an avoidant attachment style. Now, this is kind of contradictory to like this notion of trust. Because trust requires like conflict, trust requires a blind faith notion. But my therapist actually taught me that I learned how to leave in from my father, right? I was not raised by my dad. I have the fatherless story in my life. I know who my dad is, but he has never been a pillar in my life. And so that lesson of absence and not being there has manifested in like this fear, avoidant, 1 foot in, 1 foot out. And when I get uncomfortable, when I feel emotional discomfort, and not in the way of like violation or betrayal, I do think it's very important for me to say that, but mostly in those spaces where I have to be emotionally vulnerable and I have to have that intimacy with my emotions, I leave. And it took for the situation to happen for me to, one, hear the person told me, like, Khadijah, you hurt me. You hurt me because you left. You hurt me because you left abruptly and did not have any room for conversation. And that broke trust. And so this kind of like jigsaw or Rubik's Cube, my belief in which I was following with trust. Because to me, I always believed trust was truth telling. And I'm a very truthful person. And I allow my truth to be told with this net of kindness, right? And I think a lot of times when people hear truth telling without brutality is like this coddling, and that is not me. Okay, baby, I'm not a coddler. But the kindness is, even though I'm going to hold you accountable, even though I'm going to tell you the truth, I'm still speaking from a lens of well intent and also goodwill. And also the extension of that trust, even in the space of like holding you accountable or discomfort or confrontation, I'm not going to I was going to say, I'm not going to hold you to this expectation of only your mistakes. But I do have a relationship with having very high expectations that like is nearly impossible to meet. So I think that's also a moment in which I have to think about my relationship with trust and how it's intertwined with the expectations in which I hold. I also think the relationship dynamic between trust and vulnerability, in which I thought they were like twin sisters, they are the same. They're one and the same. It's not like a flip of a coin. Trust and vulnerability, if we were to personify, it is the same person. There is no separation with one and the other. And so this made me think about how I navigate life, primarily how I navigate life through the mundane, because most of life exists within the mundane, right? Most of life is going to exist within our average Tuesday, our average Wednesday. And of course, that's going to look vastly different on what your lifestyle is, but that does not exclude that we're living in mostly the mundane. And now, of course, you have like these grandiose moments and these moments of celebration, but most of life is not like the turning up in the club because we're celebrating a promotion or we're celebrating a birthday or we're celebrating whatever. Most of life operates through like your average Tuesday. And with that understanding, it's like, oh, everything is that deep. Everything is that deep. If I'm going to be on this process of interrogating, and I'm using the word interrogating on purpose because I think the word interrogation obviously has a relationship with like criminalization and what's the word that I'm looking for? I guess we'll just go with criminalization. But I'm interrogating through a lens of intentionality and through a lens of mindfulness. And through this interrogation, I had to confront my monolithic perspective in which I view trust. And because I've only attached trust to truth-telling and not seeing it as its like multi-dimension experience and emotion that it is, I realized that I was robbing myself of the depths in which I can experience life and the depths in which I can hold relationships with, and tying this back to the relationships in which I hold with others. If you have these really high expectations that you really know that most people can never meet, are you really trusting? Not saying that you are not truthful, but are you really trusting? And then this goes a step further if we're looking at this through a lens of love and what your heart needs and all the demands that we have. And again, I'm using the word demand on purpose, not through a lens of like criminalization again, but through a lens of saying what your heart needs through demanding. What do you really want to be heard from the other person? And that trust that it takes to be vulnerable, to say that I need intimacy in whatever the interpretation of intimacy is for you, to say that I need stability, and trusting that the other person is going to be receptive or not, and then leaving if it's not what you need. But I do think the relationship with trust and vulnerability is something that I'm thinking about more and more. And I'm also thinking about it through a lens. It's not like an off and on switch. In the same way that empathy is not an off and on switch. It's like you're all in or you're all out. Because even to be 1 foot in, 1 foot out, you're out. You can't experience the depth in which you need. You can't experience or demand the trust that you need if you're 1 foot out, because you're not trusting. And so really thinking about, one, who taught you how to trust? Or in the absence of the caregivers that were supposed to be trusting to you, what have you built in its absence? And as we are navigating our life, as we're navigating different chapters of adulthood, like, how can you rebuild or interrogate the relationship in which you have with trust?